Hello and welcome to this game review. We'll have a look at a game in which White did not really deal with his space advantage too well. So it started as e4 b6. Already White is a lot better here, as Black is not fighting for the center, so White is allowed to play e4 and d4. Here knight c3 is played. Maybe a bit more accurate is to start with this, because now after the moves queen e2 or knight f3, Black will not be able to pin the knight on c3, but this is fine as well. Knight c3, e6, knight f3, White continues very naturally. Of course, this gives an advantage. And after d5, now we have to do something, because the threat is d takes e4, because of our pin knight on c3, so White cannot just ignore it. There are some options. Basically it's about e5 or de5. e5 seems to make a bit more sense, but de5 is also possible, because now we are going to probably get some kind of position where White is better developed. For example, queen d5 castles, after bishop c3 bc. The threats are like c4, bishop a3, some ideas of a4 a5, and the Black doesn't really have enough compensation for the bishop there, but of course he is kind of fine. Maybe the most ambitious is e5. Black would go here, bishop d2, but here Black can double the pawns and probably play c5, which should also give him a decent game. So at this point it's not clear what the best variation is, probably ed. But White played bishop g5, which doesn't really make much sense, because Black can just take here and start exchanging stuff. Here the point is, if you take here, then this attacks the queen, so probably White was planning to take here, but now again Black can take. The queen cannot take back because we will lose a piece, so we would have to take here. And in this moment Black has a lot of moves, but the most important probably is to go here. And here Black is the one in the driver's seat, as he has all his pieces developed, and there are some technical problems for White. For example, if here, then g2 will hang. This bishop is very strong in the center of the board, and in this opposite colored bishop position, White's king will be a bit less safe. Instead, Black played h6, so White took, and now he plays e5, closing the position, but this doesn't really make much sense. If we're giving up the bishop pair, we are going to be worse long term. So what White has to do is to go for some kind of complications, maybe knight e5, maybe taking here, and for example after taking back, then knight e5, castling queenside, trying to attack Black while his king is in the center and the pieces are not developed. But now after e5 and queen e7, Black is probably a little bit better, because he has typical play with c5. He can always double the pawns on c3, and he can also try to exchange the bishop through a6 at a good moment. So in general, in these structures, White's plan is to give checkmate, so if he doesn't do that, he will likely be worse. So castles, takes in c5, and here White plays c4, but this is not a very good decision, because it opens up the opponent's bishop. And as we will see, White will simply get a bad structure, where he will have to suffer with weaknesses on the c file and on e5. Of course, the threat is go here, so we should probably just move the queen. And now, for example, c4 would not be very smart by Black. Of course, this is playable, but now White should not worry about the pressure on the center, which means he can slowly focus on his attack on the king side. For example, knight d2, f4, f5, or maybe move the queen to f4, to g4, something like this. Black is fine, and he might castle queenside, but then we can also insert a4, a5, or just continue with this plan anyway. So queen e3 is a move, queen d2 is a move. Either way, we shouldn't really allow our opponent's pieces to get improved. Now, for example, after castles, Black has no problems, and White will be left with some weaknesses after the pawns are exchanged. So cd happens instead, cd here, and knight d4. So again, White's only chance here is to attack while his opponent's pieces are undeveloped, which is what he does. He uses his opponent's weak square on d6, and here he puts the knight there, but even so, black is slightly better because his bishop is no worse than this knight. He can also take the bishop on his d3 if he wants, and long term the weaknesses on e5 and c4 will come to tell. But okay, bishop c2, queen g5, but this allows white to start his plan with f4, f5, and after queen h7, f5 would have been even more powerful, but this is also fine. And f5 finally happens, and now white is in the driver's seat as black did not really use his opponent's weaknesses, and after e takes f5, this already loses because of knight f5, and black will have a hard time stopping the fork on e7, so after queen g5, h4, black is lost, he gives up the piece, and from here white managed to convert quite convincingly. So here probably we shouldn't have allowed our opponent's pieces to get activated so easily. Of course, we know the bishop on b7 is always bad for black, so there's no reason to open it up. Instead, we should just move the queen to give a square to our bishop and focus on where we're stronger, which is the king side. And here also black didn't play very precisely from here. Knight a6 was fine, all of these moves are fine, but here starting with queen g5 didn't really make much sense. Probably black can even exchange this bishop to leave the knights on the board, and without this bishop probably white cannot really give checkmate. So this was probably black's best idea, to exchange as many pieces as possible and go for an endgame where these pawns will be weak.